My name's Charles Wheeler. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Greenbacker. I'm excited to talk to you about some recent hires that we have made in our organization as we attack some of the opportunities we see ahead of us in 2024 and beyond. Greenbacker is a funds management platform and an independent power producing company managing approximately $3.6 billion worth of assets. And we have grown from an organization where our first investment was $1 million to an organization of that scale. Along the way, we've added people and investments that are suitable for an organization of our scale. During 2023, we saw the need to make some changes of personnel to prepare us for the next stage of our growth. And so I'm delighted to introduce to you today three recent additions to our team. Chris Smith, our Chief Financial Officer, Dan De Boer, our Head of Investments in Infrastructure, and Carl Weatherley-White, the Head of Capital Markets. So those three individuals were added to our bench this year in order to build the organization for the future. They bring with them a wealth of experience and capabilities that we will need as we grow the organization.
To start off, would love to hear about your prior experience before joining Greenbacker. Chris, do you want to share about that?
Sure. So for the last 20 plus years, I've been involved in all aspects of the energy investment spectrum. And for the last 10 years, I've really been focused on sustainable financing and investment platforms like Greenbacker. Previously, I was Managing Director and Treasurer of Hannon Armstrong. I joined shortly after the IPO, and I led it through a period of growth to about $5 billion of total on-balance sheet and off-balance sheet assets. And then I led a similar situated company through the IPO and listing on the New York Stock Exchange. And then before Greenbacker, I was partner, founder, and CFO of a sustainably focused middle market private equity fund with about $500 million of capital. Previously to that, I had stints at Merrill Lynch and also had been CFO of an energy asset development firm.
Carl, would you like to share?
So like Chris, I've been in the energy markets for many years. For about 20 years, I was in the financing business around project finance. And I really started with independent power companies that were doing non-renewable energy financing. And at that time, wind power started to come into the market, followed by solar. So I was able to participate in a lot of the industry's understanding of those asset classes, which gave me a lot of experience in financing around renewables. About 10 years ago, I got attracted to development, and I joined a development company, very entrepreneurial. And then I had a series of similar positions, all in solar, and recently was given the opportunity to join Greenbacker to support our financing objectives, which is very exciting.
And I know also in that development experience was where you worked with Dan.
Yes, Dan and I worked together at the same solar development company in New York for 3 years. That was about 5 years ago. We each went a separate way, and then now have had the opportunity to come back together, which is really helpful, particularly for a new team coming together. I'd also known Chris in the past, and so we have some shared history, and we understand each other, which is great joining a company like this.
Yeah, the renewable energy space is the smallest large industry out there. It's obviously an incredibly growing part of our energy landscape, but the faces in the industry have kind of been the same for the last 15, 20 years. The first ever tax equity deal that I got exposed to when I first got into renewable energy, Carl was actually on the other side of it. So there's been lots of paths weaving in and out as we've kind of all come together here at Greenbacker.
So with that, Dan, could you share a little bit more about your journey in the space and your prior experience?
Really, for the last 16 years, have been in the energy transition private equity sector. Coming out of banking, this was an absolute focus of mine. Renewable energy investing, energy transition investing has been a passion and kind of a missions work of my career thus far. I started off working at a group called D.E. Shaw Group. They were a multi-strat hedge fund, which had a big focus and one of the only focuses in the mid-aughts in the renewable energy sector. Joined them and helped them launch a couple of platforms within the renewable energy space, particularly in onshore and offshore wind. From there, we launched a group called D.E. Shaw Renewable Investments that was focused on real asset investing. and continue to proceed from there with stops at Blackstone Energy Partners, helping them launch a platform in the sector called Onyx Renewable Partners, and then getting into project development, as Carl said, with the group Vivo Power that we worked with. For the last 5 years, I was at Allianz Capital Partners leading energy transition investing in the Americas, and then recently joined the team here.
I think that's a good segue. Would love to hear what brought you to Greenbacker.
Greenbacker has real hands-on operational expertise, whether it's our construction management team, our procurement team on the equipment side, our ongoing asset management. We're able to solve real-world problems within power and energy transition that a lot of other investors can't. So it allows us to bring a value-add strategy that I find incredibly interesting and exciting. And then I'd say the other big factor is the investors that we have within our funds. Most investors in the energy transition space happen to be institutions. We spend a lot of time really focused on high net worth individuals, family offices, kind of democratizing private market investing to a wide swath of investors. And I find that both a great opportunity to bring new opportunities to investors, but also a really strong, steady source of capital for the projects that we invest in.
And Carl, I know you also play a huge role in placing financing for the projects that Dan just referenced. Could you share a little bit more about your role at Greenbacker and what attracted you to that?
Well, Greenbacker has staked out a very unique and sustainable position in the market. It's one of the few infrastructure companies that have targeted renewable energy and energy transition. And as Dan said, opening up opportunity for investors to participate. My focus is to bring more lenders, tax equity, and institutional investors to help support the projects that Greenbacker is acquiring and building and operating. And there aren't many opportunities for those types of investors to access this point in the market. The Greenbacker team has developed this platform for over 10 years. So we've got scale, track record, operational experience, and I think importantly, have positioned themselves to participate in the growth that we see in the market. So it's got that wonderful sort of point where it's got enough scale to matter. It's got the foundation for future growth, and it's set up to be a steward and really a fiduciary of the investors that we are attracting. And that's really fun, actually, in this market.
And Chris, what attracted you to take on the CFO role at Greenbacker?
Well, I was really attracted to the really big flexible toolkit that Greenbacker has built. So to echo what Dan and Carl said, the enviable position in the marketplace that it has, the reputation of the people and the work that it's done, it's very, very hard to replicate. So that was really exciting to me, and just see it as a great platform to really grow upon and doing a lot of very exciting things. I think the other thing is we're really focused on here building an ecosystem with a lot of momentum to it. The collection of how we've put things together is very, very unique. Dan touched on it. Our ability to act as an operator is very rare. And we have a great group of back office folks, construction and asset operations folks that really have their hands on the assets and are able to offer a lot of capability that others just don't have and can't have. And I think that that's a real source of alpha and excellence within the way that we've positioned things.
I'd say also that there is a unique aspect, and it kind of brings it all together, that we do have evergreen structures. We're in these assets for the long term. And it forces us and allows us to be true good stewards of these assets. We're not trying to execute some sort of short-term financial engineering. We are not trying to focus on how do we maximize profits in the short term. We're focused on how do we create value for all of our stakeholders over a very long time frame. And for assets like ours that tend to be pretty long dated, that is, I think, a very valuable perspective to take.
Taking a step back, looking at energy transition more broadly as an asset class, Greenbacker is well positioned to have an impact because of its business model. Looking ahead at 2024 and beyond, what trends stand out to you in terms of opportunities for Greenbacker, and where do you see Greenbacker expanding and continuing to build renewable energy assets and follow through on its mission?
So the trends we're really focused on for 2024 and 2025 in the infrastructure space, at least, are really about taking advantage of some of the macro tailwinds that we see in the industry. It's really one of the most exciting times to be investing, I think, in the energy transition. And number one, first and foremost, there is the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a huge benefit to the industry. It provided stability, 10 years of runway for a lot of the tax credits that have existed in the sector, and also provide a door to open new verticals within energy transition, whether it be the hopeful emergence of green hydrogen opportunities, expanded credit support for things like battery storage. It's really allowing the energy transition to take that next step beyond just kind of core renewable energy generation. And while that legislation was passed, I guess in late 2022, we're just now starting to see the real fruit of that labor. So the guidance that the Treasury has provided around these credits has started to solidify. Markets have started to marshal capital, put together structures to actually take advantage of these opportunities. And so we're really seeing it hit a steady state in 2024 and 2025. On top of that, we've never seen more demand for power. One could argue whether or not that's a good thing for the world environmentally as we look to push forward on a decarbonization. But certainly from a power markets perspective, the advent of generative AI, the proliferation of cryptocurrencies and other digital currencies, as well as the electrification of things like transportation, home heating, all of these are leading to the US and the world consuming more power. And so being able to provide that and being able to provide it in either a carbon neutral or in a truly renewable format is a huge opportunity to a lot of our strategies out there.
And you touched on this briefly, but with the IRA, we saw massive new investments in various areas and in forms of tax credits. Carl, do you want to touch on anything there in terms of looking ahead where you see the exciting opportunities in 2024 and beyond within energy transition?
Well, I think it dovetails to what Dan said. So the major tailwinds for the growth of the industry, if you think about power generation, is matched by an increased acceptance of those assets in the minds of institutional investors. So as energy becomes more accepted by users of electricity, it becomes more and more standard. It also becomes more and more standard for investors to allocate capital to the space as scale starts to hit. So if from an institutional perspective, you could think about sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, endowments. You can think about commercial banks, insurance companies, or tax equity investors. 10 years ago, the energy transition was sort of a cottage industry, and it was an interesting addition to people's portfolio. Today and going forward, it's going to become and has become a very clear objective of these investors to have exposure to this asset class. And I think that's the combination that we all find exciting, that there's an absolute need for the power and there's an absolute need for investors to deploy into the sector. And that's the sort of the crossing point that I think we find ourselves in at Greenbacker, which really provides for a very healthy growth outlook.
Yeah, I think about us as being at the nexus of connecting deserving projects with capital, right? And bringing those two things together and facilitating that in a way that's very exciting, so that those important projects can happen. And most of these projects are some of them are smaller, some of them are larger, but we're able to put them into our network and bring them to life.
Yeah, when we think about the global opportunity here, a lot of different organizations, whether it's the UN or others, have said that it's expected to be about 150 trillion of capital required to meet the goals that we've set for ourselves in terms of decarbonization and energy transition by 2050. That's 150 trillion over the course of 30 years. That's like 5 trillion a year of capital that needs to be deployed. Last year, 2023, was the largest deployment of capital in energy transition to date, and that was only around 1.7 to 1.8 trillion. So we are still multiple short of where we would need to be to hit our own goals. The amount of capital, as I said, that needs to be marshaled kind of across all these different participants is really massive. And so being able to be the tip of the spear for a lot of that is a great opportunity for Greenbacker.
And I might add, the one interesting element of energy from a power generation perspective is the projects are developed on a local basis typically. There's a lot of local knowledge that is necessary to bring a project to being successful. The skill sets that requires does not necessarily include access to institutional capital. And so that's partly where Greenbacker has a role and has developed a very good role, where we form relationships with small developers across the country who bring projects to the point where they need capital, but they don't have any ways to do that. Similarly, large institutional investors have no ability to get to these local developers. And so they look to players like Greenbacker to be able to aggregate those portfolios into an investable type of investment. So that's another angle that I think Greenbacker has done extremely well, and I think, again, positions us for growth.
Given Greenbacker's mission of empowering a more sustainable world by connecting individuals and institutions with investments in clean energy, would love to hear how you see Greenbacker fulfilling its mission, both in the short term and long term, and what are you most focused on?
The core of a lot of our strategies really is in doing just that. In our infrastructure strategies, we are 100% focused on delivering renewable energy or sustainable power sources to the market, whether that be solar projects as small as on a company's rooftop or a 1,000-acre large utility scale solar farm. We are providing the next generation of power for our society as a whole. And so that is never going to change. That is a core part of our DNA here. And I think we deliver it in kind of every project that we're putting out to the market.
Yeah, I'll address the question in a slightly different way, because we really haven't touched on the culture of Greenbacker. What I have found so exciting for me personally in the industry that we're in is that there are so many angles that people can bring that type of impact, whether it's policy, technology, financing, businesses. And Greenbacker has attracted the really a wonderful group of young and experienced professionals whose mission is to achieve those goals. And I think by bringing those people together, their energy, their intelligence, their commitment, you just see that resonating every day at Greenbacker. And I think that's a very fulfilling character that I find exciting.
I like to say that the world doesn't really have a technology problem. We have a sustainable financing problem. And that's really the role and niche that I think Greenbacker fits into. We have people who are working every day all over the country. They're committed to excellence, focused on reporting transparency and doing the best they can for investors to create these opportunities and to make them available to investors. And that's really, I think, really undergirds everything that we do in terms of a mission and what we're focused on achieving.
And last question, I know that your passion for impact expands beyond your role at Greenbacker into your personal lives. Would love to hear about nonprofits or charities that you all are involved in.
Yeah, for sure. So beyond climate change and environmentally focused opportunity sets, I've spent most of my time focused on the education space. For really, I guess at this point, the last 14 years, I've sat on the board and served in various capacities with a group called Jounce Partners. It's an education-focused startup currently based in Philadelphia that is really focused on leveling up teacher education. So basically, Jounce is actually a derivative of acceleration. So as you move further on down the derivative scale, you eventually get to Jounce. And so the goal here is to accelerate the rate of learning at which teachers learn and the pedagogy that they use to be able to teach their children. And so we're hopefully creating a higher standard of teacher competency in schools that we partner with. And so Jounce has really been focused on partnering with school districts, whether it's charter networks or local public school districts, working with a lot of school administration and helping to grow, again, the teacher base there and support them in their needs as they're trying to deliver their lessons to children. So that's been a big focus of mine for really the last 14 years.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in terms of nonprofit support, I think the largest commitment I've made has been to my children, which are definitely nonprofit, and helping them to become adults that with a positive outlook on life. But I've also, over the years, had volunteer opportunities that I've enjoyed. In 2 weeks, I've brought together a team from Greenbacker. We're going to go and help plant a sustainable forest on the tip of Roosevelt Island. This is a project put together by a foundation unrelated to Greenbacker, but it's a biodiversity focus with a sustainability aim, and hopefully we'll plant it in 2 weekends, and we'll be able to go visit it, over the years and watch it grow.
And Chris?
I've really enjoyed working with disadvantaged youth. I've been active in the Hill Country Youth Ranch program, which is a great program for kids, and I've been supportive of that. And then I've also done a lot through our local church, actually, through various initiatives that they have, including homelessness and the elderly. So that's mostly what I've been focused on. And the only other thing I would just mention is I've done Habitat for Humanity, which has been a lot of fun. These weekend home builds where you go in like Bob the Builder with a toolkit and tool belt has been real neat to do.
Right.